July 10th, 1943. The beaches of Gela, Sicily, burned beneath a morning sun already rising through the haze of naval bombardment. The Mediterranean wind carried the taste of cordite and salt as the first waves of U.S. infantry crawled across open sand toward the dunes. German and Italian machine guns opened from the ridgelines, the bursts tearing fountains of dust around them. In that chaos, one sound cut through everything else, a rhythmic metallic crack, unlike any rifle heard before. 8 shots, rapid, precise. The M1 Garand had entered the war. Private First Class Robert Gaines crouched behind a half-buried Sherman track, his helmet ringing from shrapnel, sweat streaming down his neck. He pressed the rifle's stock into his shoulder, sighted on a muzzle flash, and fired 1, 2, 3 times before the gun's sharp metallic ping signaled the empty clip's ejection. He slapped in another without thought. Around him, his platoon advanced not in cautious volleys, but in rolling waves of firepower. No longer did they pause to work a bolt, no longer lose precious seconds between shots. The Garand's gas-operated system cycled on its own, harnessing the rifle's recoil to chamber the next round, a small mechanical miracle that made American infantry feel unstoppable. On those Sicilian slopes, the rifle's secret, a compact, self-contained gas system perfected in secrecy at Springfield Armory, turned ordinary soldiers into a storm of steel. German troops armed with bolt-action car 98 KS found themselves outshot and overwhelmed, their carefully timed bursts drowned beneath a torrent of semi-automatic fire. The lesson was immediate and brutal. The United States had brought a new rhythm to warfare, faster, steadier, and relentless. Long before the Garand's bark echoed across Sicily, its heartbeat was forged in a place far quieter, the old brick halls of the Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. There, in the late 1920s, a soft-spoken Canadian-born engineer named Jean Cantius Garand worked in near obscurity, surrounded by machine tools and the whine of metal lathes. To most, he was just John. But to the War Department, he was the man tasked with the impossible, designing America's first reliable semi-automatic service rifle. At the time, no nation on Earth had successfully armed its entire military with a self-loading rifle. The risks were enormous. Semi-autos were notoriously finicky, too much carbon, too much dirt, too much cold, and they jammed. Worse, they wore down parts faster than bolts. But the Army saw the future. Faster fire meant tactical dominance. They needed a weapon that could function in trenches, deserts, and jungles, and John Garand was their bet. He began with prototypes using a gas trap system, a clever mechanism that siphoned pressure near the muzzle to push a piston, cycling the bolt. It worked on paper. It even passed early tests. But in field trials, the system proved vulnerable. Mud clogged the trap. Heat warped the cylinder. Soldiers distrusted it. Worse, political infighting at Ordnance nearly shelved the whole concept in favor of traditional bolt-action designs. Garand refused to give up. Quietly, almost defiantly, he revised the design, abandoning the original gas trap and replacing it with a gas port system, drawing pressure from a small port drilled directly into the barrel. It was simpler, cleaner, more efficient, and crucially, it worked under combat stress. That breakthrough came not with fanfare, but with a whisper. In 1936, the Army officially adopted the M1 Garand. Its secret, that revolutionary gas port system tucked just inches from the chamber, invisible to the enemy, but decisive in the hands of a trained soldier. The genius of the M1 Garand wasn't in one part alone. It was in how the parts danced together. At the heart of the rifle sat its gas-operated mechanism, now no longer hindered by the flawed gas trap of early prototypes. Instead, the system bled a precise measure of gas from a small port in the barrel, just forward of the chamber, down into a stainless steel cylinder beneath. There, it met the long stroke piston. The gas shoved the piston rearward, driving the operating rod and rotating bolt open in one smooth, hammering motion. Ejected brass spun from the chamber. A new round fed instantly from the clip below. All of it happened in a heartbeat, faster than a trained soldier could work a bolt, yet with the control and rhythm of aimed fire. This wasn't a spray weapon. It was precision made faster. The 8-round en-bloc clip, another of Garand's innovations, fit directly into the internal magazine. Unlike traditional box mags or stripper clips, the en-bloc was inserted whole, staying inside the rifle as each round was chambered. When the last bullet fired, the empty clip ejected with a now iconic metallic ping. It was a sound that echoed across the front lines, often romanticized, sometimes feared. Yet it was part of a rhythm American infantrymen came to trust. One trigger pull, one shot, 8 times without breaking sight picture. The bolt design, too, was a marvel, a rotating, cammed lockup that bore the stress of .306 Springfield rounds without loosening under heat or recoil. It locked tight, cycled fast, and sealed clean. The entire action could be field stripped in minutes, cleaned with a rag and a rod, and back in the fight before most bolt rifles even cleared a jam. But most crucially, the gas port design solved the most persistent issue of early autoloaders: reliability. Mud, sand, snow, it didn't matter. The gas piston's tight fit and the closed system meant fewer fouling points. Unlike exposed bolt rifles or delicate recoil-operated weapons, the Garand kept cycling. In Tunisia, in the bocage of France, and on Pacific islands where heat and grit devoured lesser weapons, the M1 kept firing. This mechanical harmony was no accident. It was Garand's obsession. And for the soldiers who carried it, it meant the difference between being pinned down or breaking through. The M1 Garand didn't just change how American soldiers fired, it changed how they fought. Before the war, the U.S. Army's infantry doctrine resembled that of most global powers. Maneuver squads built around bolt-action rifles, supported by machine guns and mortars. Fire and movement relied on calculated bursts, with every soldier contributing carefully aimed shots, but limited by rate of fire. The 1903 Springfield, for example, demanded perfect cycling technique. It was accurate, yes, but under fire, under pressure. That bolt was a wall between thought and trigger. Then came the Garand. With it, the rifle squad evolved. A single platoon of 12 men, each armed with an M1, could lay down a volume of fire that rivaled or exceeded that of a German squad, where only the machine gun was truly automatic. The Garand gave every man his own suppressing fire, mobile, accurate, and relentless. In Sicily, commanders noted it immediately. U.S. patrols ambushed German units with shocking intensity. 8-round bursts tore through hedgerows and stone walls before the enemy could react. One German officer, captured near Troina, reportedly muttered, "We couldn't believe every American had a semi-automatic rifle." It was unheard of, a technical leap the Wehrmacht had underestimated. German soldiers, by contrast, carried the Karabiner 98K, a refined Mauser, brutally accurate but slow. 5-round internal magazine, bolt action. Against a Garand in trained hands, it was a losing race. While the Kar 98K shooter chambered his second round, the American had already fired 3 and was adjusting position. Fire superiority wasn't just an advantage, it was now doctrine. U.S. squads began moving more aggressively. Cover fire was no longer the job of just one machine gunner, it was a team effort. Flanking became faster. Assaults became deadlier. The Garand enabled motion. It bred initiative. In after-action reports from North Africa to Italy, officers repeatedly credited the rifle with changing the tempo of engagement. Ambushes turned into advances. Defensive lines held longer. Morale surged. Because the man with the Garand didn't feel like just another rifleman. He felt like he owned the battlefield. To understand the M1 Garand's impact, you can't just read technical specs. You have to hear the voices of the men who carried it through mud, dust, and blood. Private First Class Harold Roebuck, 45th Infantry Division, once wrote in a letter home from Sicily, "I don't know what kind of brains built this rifle, but I'd like to shake his hand." That sentiment echoed across the front lines, from the mountains of Italy to the jungles of the Pacific. GIs developed an almost reverent bond with the Garand. It wasn't just a weapon, it was insurance, confidence, firepower in hand. And then there was the ping. The metallic ring of the en-bloc clip ejecting after the 8th round, iconic, controversial, and misunderstood. The myth has long circulated that German soldiers learned to wait for the ping, then attack during reload. But veterans say otherwise. In real combat, noise was everywhere: gunfire, shouting, grenades, screaming. A tiny metallic ping was drowned out by chaos. And more importantly, the reload on a Garand wasn't slow. With training, a soldier could slam in a fresh clip and resume fire in under 2 seconds. That supposed weakness was more legend than liability. What the ping truly represented was rhythm. Soldiers described the Garand as natural, its cycling smooth, its recoil firm but manageable. There was no need to reposition the hands to work a bolt, no momentary break in sight picture. It allowed for sustained, aimed fire, even under duress. In close combat, it was ferocious. At range, it was reliable. Marines in the Pacific came to rely on it heavily. While jungle humidity corroded many firearms, the Garand's robust gas system kept it operational. Marine radar units praised the rifle's ability to keep pace during night raids and amphibious assaults. Its semi-automatic design allowed fire superiority even against surprise attacks, when split-second reactions made all the difference. Enemy forces took note. Japanese troops, armed mostly with Arisaka bolt actions, often found themselves outgunned. German reports began referencing the American self-loading rifle as a battlefield threat, not a curiosity. Some German troops would scavenge Garands from fallen GIs, attempting to use them themselves, despite the different ammunition logistics. That alone speaks volumes. The M1 Garand changed how American soldiers felt in battle. It wasn't just about accuracy. It was about certainty. Each pull of the trigger meant another round downrange, without mechanical interruption. That built trust. Trust turned to aggression. And aggression, when backed by steel, became victory. By the time Sicily was secured, one thing had become crystal clear to the Axis. The U.S. infantryman wasn't just well trained, he was well armed. And standing at the heart of that firepower was the M1 Garand. General George S. Patton, never one for understatement, famously declared the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised. Coming from a man who commanded tanks and orchestrated sweeping armored thrusts across Europe, this was no idle compliment. Patton saw the Garand not as a luxury, but as a battlefield equalizer, a tool that let American soldiers punch above their weight, even when terrain, weather, or enemy numbers worked against them. To understand why, compare it to what the rest of the world's infantry were carrying in 1943. The German Karabiner 98K, for all its legendary ruggedness, was still a bolt-action rifle. 5 rounds, manually cycled. Deadly in the hands of a skilled marksman, but slow in a firefight. The Japanese Arisaka Type 99, bolt action as well. The British Lee Enfield had a higher magazine capacity at 10 rounds, but again, it required constant manipulation of the bolt. Soviet Marcin Nagants were solid, but aging. Only the Americans had successfully issued a semi-automatic rifle to their frontline troops. And this wasn't just about volume of fire. It was about sustained accuracy under stress. The Garand allowed American squads to suppress enemy positions more effectively, engage multiple targets without losing tempo, and maintain pressure during advances. It meant A GI didn't have to break rhythm to reload every 5 shots. It meant that in urban warfare, where sudden movements from windows or doorways demanded split-second decisions, the Garand answered with speed and power. From the hills of Italy to the hedgerows of France, from the volcanic sands of Iwo Jima to the frozen forests of the Ardennes, the M1 Garand became an extension of the American soldier. Durable, reliable, and devastating. It was more than a rifle. It was the embodiment of U.S. industrial power meeting battlefield necessity. After the war, as nations reflected on lessons learned, the Garand stood as a symbol of American foresight. It proved that arming infantry with superior tools wasn't just about technology, it was a strategic choice, one that helped shorten firefights, save lives, and tilt engagements in favor of the Allies. Even decades later, veterans recalled the Garand with reverence. Some kept theirs long after service. Others remembered its weight, its heft, the smell of oil and cordite, the familiar recoil that told them they were still alive and still fighting. The M1 Garand wasn't perfect, but it was perfectly timed. It arrived when the world needed an edge against tyranny, and it gave every American soldier carrying it a fighting chance, not just to survive, but to win.